Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
Hi, this is Kim Polishuk
and Jen Giffen, hosts of Shooks and Giff, the podcast,
a proud member of the Education Podcast Network.
Just like the show you're listening to right now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual host.
Be sure to check out all of our other great podcasts by visiting edupodcastnetwork.com.
And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 23 of the EduMagic podcast. Today, I'm interviewing Jen Giffen, a digital literacy consultant from Canada. In this episode, she shares about the power of being flexible during teaching and engaging in those teachable moments with your students. Jen is a Google Innovator, Microsoft Innovative Educator, Apple Teacher, and, among many other things, a co-host of the Shooks and Gifts podcast. Jen is a believer that you have time to do anything you want. You just need to make time. So listen in on our conversation as we dive into how to be a flexible teacher, taking advantage of those teachable moments, and diving deep into your curriculum. Let's get started.
All right. Thank you so much, Jen, for stopping by the EduMagic podcast. How is it on the other side of the mic?
It's great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and talk to you and new teachers and those who are aspiring teachers. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. So can you tell my listeners a little bit about your teaching journey? What got you into education and all those fun things? If you remember back to your college days, what inspired you to take this journey into education?
I was one of those very stereotypical kids who knew that they wanted to teach from a very young age. So I have, like, my mom has pictures of me sitting with my stuffed animals, teaching them lessons. I remember babysitting the 3 little girls that used to live next door to me when I was growing up, and I would pretend to teach them lessons. And it was just, that's always what I wanted to do. So when I finished high school and I was applying to, we actually go to university. That's the track that we go in Canada to get a teaching degree. I applied into a concurrent education program. So you can either do them at the same time, right? The concurrent program, or the consecutive program, which you do your 3 or 4 year degree, and then you do a 1 or now 2 year afterwards. And I applied to a concurrent degree and I didn't get in. And I was flabbergasted. Like, I was a really good student. I had like a 90, like a 4.0 GPA. And I was valedictorian. I was student council president, and I'd gotten everything I wanted my whole life. Like, it just sort of came very easy to me. So when I didn't get it, I thought, gosh, what am I going to do? And I went through and I did a 4-year degree, and then I applied afterwards, and I got in then. And it was a nice exercise in humility. It made me realize not to rest on my laurels, and it taught me a lot. And in a lot of ways, I think it helps me now with kids who face those, obstacles at some point in their life, or in their educational trajectory, to say, like, hey, things might come easy, but then there's going to be this time that it won't. And that's okay, because there's a path for you that's meant to be. And I really do believe that. So I got there. And in the end, when I did the 1-year degree, I sat with my friends who got into the concurrent program, who I knew, because I did my concurrent year for education at the same university that I'd gone the first 4 years. And I said to them, okay, so what do you have to do? And what should we do here? And how is this different? And they had 3 hours of extra class a week versus what I did. And we all ended up in the same spot. So I guess in a way it was kind of a blessing, but that's how I got here. And I started teaching. My first official year was September of 2001. It's always easy for me to know what year I'm in. I'm like, oh, it was September 18. So now it's 18 years. So yeah, I've been teaching almost 20 years now, and I love it. I've had a variety of different roles in education. So I've been a classroom teacher. I teach secondary English, math, special ed. I've done literacy lead. We have something called student success, which is for students who aren't officially identified as special ed, but probably struggle in social emotional ways, or they might have problems at home, or it might be, they came to Canada and they're no longer considered English language learners, but they still need support. So I did that. And my current role, I'm actually in the district office in curriculum, and I'm a digital literacy consultant. So I've gone all that. And then next year, I'm actually back in a school. And I hate that verbiage of back in a school, like it's a demotion. So I'm returning to a school, and I'm going to be the full-time teacher librarian at a high school about 12 minutes from home, which I'm really excited about.
Well, congratulations. That sounds like a beautiful teaching journey. I love that. Lots of different experiences, work with all sorts of different children and meeting their needs in lots of different ways. So if you could think back to those years at university, can you share a favorite teaching moment from one of those days?
So I don't know if this is a favorite teaching moment, but it's certainly a memorable one. And it kind of came full circle. So the year that I did my we call it the pre-service, which was the year of my teacher's college. And I went into a school district, and they actually went on work to rule and then strike. So I had to leave that school. And I'd had a lot of, relationships built in that school. It was a school district I had taught, or I'd gone to myself. I knew some of the teachers in the school, and I got placed in a private school to finish out my practicum, and which was an incredible experience on its own, because it was like a whole different world to me. And I remember going in, and I was teaching math at the time, and math is we have two teachables in secondary. So English was my first, and that's where my passion is. And math for me, I always did well in high school, and I enjoyed it, like the puzzles of math, but I certainly was never one that math came really easily. Like math I have to work at, and math, I still have math anxiety, despite the fact that I have a minor in math. And my placement was a math placement. And I thought, okay, now, not so little known fact anymore, but at the time I was very secretive about it. But when I was in the 11th grade, my math teacher actually realized I had mild dyslexia. So, and that really got into my head in a lot of cases. And I thought, okay, I can't let people know this, and I can't be a math teacher and teach this. And I really wanted math on my ticket, because I knew I wanted to teach. Like I said, I've been doing it since I was, with my dolls when I was little. And I knew that they would never get rid of English or math in the curriculum, and it would sort of guarantee me a job, and a nice job that I could teach a little bit of both. So it was easy to place. And I went into this class. It was a grade 10 math class, and we were teaching the Cartesian plane, and it was an introduction to the Cartesian plane. And I got up there and I taught my whole lesson, and I'm going, and I'm like, why aren't things lining up because we started Cartesian plane, then we were like graphing lines. And I realized that I had transposed all my X and Y coordinates. So all of my X coordinates were on the Y axis, and vice versa. And I sat there at the end of the lesson. I'm like, what is going on? And the bell rang, and I was like, okay, we'll just come back to it tomorrow. Just do these in your books and go. And I said, oh, okay. And then I sort of stood, and I was looking at the board that I was, sort of writing on and teaching these students. And I had this like, oh my gosh, I realized what I had done. And my associate teacher was sitting there just looking at me very compassionately, like not judging. And she realized that I'd realized. She goes, so now what are you going to do? And I was like, oh my gosh, I just taught them all the wrong stuff, and they're going to go home and do their homework, and it's going to be wrong. And she said, yep, you are. So now what are you going to do about it? And I thought, oh gosh, we sat, and she did a lot of like damage control with me, and she started talking me off the ledge a little bit, because I almost started to cry, and I was like, okay, I can't believe I did this. And she said, you know what, this happens, and at least you've done it now in a safe environment, and you're going to learn this lesson really, really early in your career on how to save face and tell students, like, I'm not perfect, I made a mistake, and this is where we go with it. So while it's not like a favorite memory of mine, it was certainly a really great lesson from someone who was really compassionate, because it taught me how to deal with students when they make those kind of mistakes in a very public forum, and how to deal with setbacks. Or I don't want to call it failure, because I don't think it was a failure necessarily, but I realized how I had to pivot the lesson the next day, how I had to show humility and grace in front of my students, which I think is really important that we try not to do, especially in our first few years, right? It's I've got to be perfect, and I've got to get everything right. And I think that can be intimidating for students. And if we show them, yeah, we make mistakes too, and this happens, and we just roll with it, then we're usually pretty good to go. So good lesson early in my career that showed me that it was okay not to be perfect, because we're never going to be perfect as teachers.
Absolutely. Jen, thank you so much for sharing that. I love how you talked about several different areas that you learned about: the humility, the being able to be flexible and pivoting within a lesson. And those are great things to learn, your associate teacher said, early in your teaching career, because I think that those early experiences as a student teacher or a field student really can help shape you to become the educator that you will be your first year teaching. Because I think you'll take some of those strategies and techniques that your field or your cooperating teacher as a student teacher use and implement them into your own classroom, because that's what you saw and that's what you're given as a model. But learning these strategies and these soft skills as teachers that we don't specifically teach in the college classroom are so important. The lesson of humility, I think, goes a long way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think too, when I came back the next day and I said to them, guys, I totally screwed up. I said, I have to tell you something about myself that not many people know. And I told them about my dyslexia. And a few of the students in the class, their eyes widened because they're like, oh my goodness, I have a learning disability too. And it made me so much more human. And I had a lot of questions around that afterwards from those students. Like, well, how did you end up going to university? And how were you successful? And what helped you? And I was able to guide that way too. And it made me realize my love for special education at that moment and what we can do. So yeah, it was a good learning experience.
Oh, that's excellent. And it makes that human connection with your students. Now, you talked about working with students with special needs. Do you have any great stories about working with students who are ESL or ELL, or students who might learn a little bit differently?
Yeah, I have probably tons of them. One of my favorite stories that I love to tell about as a student with special needs, when I was student success teacher, I had a kid named Daniel in my care, we'll call it. And I was sort of like his special ed resource teacher, but again, it wasn't an official thing. And I worked with him for a few years, and he was the kind of kid who would rather look lazy than stupid. So he did everything at the last minute, but it's because he really struggled. And one day he showed up at my door and he's like, oh, miss, I've got this big English assignment due tomorrow. So, of course you do. And he hadn't really started. And so we worked, and he was a really, really well-liked kid. He was really athletic. He was really kind to the adults in the building and the students. Like, he was just a really great kid, came from a great family, but just academically really struggled. And we stream our students in Ontario. So he was in the college stream. So there's university, college, and workplace. And that's where you go. And he really was more of a workplace level kid. Like, he just didn't have the academic rigor to do what the courses in the college stream really demanded of him. Anyway, so we worked, and he decided he was going to stay in at lunch and work, so he didn't go out with his friends. And he skipped phys ed, and phys ed was like the only course ever that he felt successful in. And so he worked. I called his mom and I said, listen, he's missed school all day, and this is what he needs to do tonight. She said, okay, great. I'll call you in the morning. Called me and said, for the first time in like 11 years, I think this kid is actually proud of his work. And I was just filled with joy. And I went up to his classroom at the end of his second period when he had English. And I said to my colleague, John, I said, hey, hand it in, right? He looked through the papers on his desk and sort of gave me this look and looked again. He's like, it's not here. So what are you talking about? It's not there. And he says, not here. So I go like tearing down the halls, and I yank Dan out of class, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm reading the kid the riot act. And he's staring at the floor. And I said, you need to own this. Like, tell me why you didn't hand this in. What is going on? And I was so incensed at the perceived apathy. And he just looked up at me, Sam, and he looked at me in the eyes, and his eyes were water over with tears. And he had this quiet but strong voice. And he said to me, Miss, I didn't hand it in because when it's in my bag, it's still good. And I burst out crying. Like, I just burst into tears. And I said, I'm so sorry we've done this to you. It changed the way that I assessed, because think of all the stuff that we write, especially as an English teacher, where like we write all over their papers, and he sees that and he said, I see that. And that's better writing than I could ever do. And sometimes it's good stuff in there, but they don't realize. So now when I give to students, feedback to students, especially students in the college or workplace stream, I have a little piece of paper that's really bright color so they can find it at the bottom of their bag. It's like a heart and a light bulb. And the heart is like 2 things I really like, and the light bulb's 2 ideas for the next assignment we're moving on to, because I know where we're going. And I don't need to give you 14,000 ideas. I just need a couple of things to help you improve as we move forward. It really humanized the assessment process for me. It's a story I have shared far and wide, because sometimes we forget. We just think, oh, they look lazy, but it's not. He was afraid. He was afraid of getting a bad mark again, because this was, as his mom said, the most work he'd ever done and the most proud she'd ever seen him. I did teach a group of ELLs students once who had just come from Pakistan. And we call it ESL step 1 or A, very, very little command of the English language. And coming from Pakistan, a very warm climate, it was the first day that there was snow, and we get snow in Canada. They're looking out the window, like they're not paying any attention to the little like stuff we're trying to do. And I said, okay, that's it. Let's go. And we went outside, and instead of teaching them like the words that I thought I'm reading the stories, I taught them how to build a snowman, and we had a little snowball fight, and they learned the vocabulary of winter in a really authentic way. And I love that story. And I still think about those kids a lot, and how that pure joy on the face of 16-year-olds that you normally see when 5-year-olds first see snow and really understand what it is. It was really special.
And that's a great, meaningful learning experience for them. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing those. Those are beautiful stories, and I know that it'll lift my audience up and help them think through assessment and through meaningful learning with their students, and taking advantage of the teachable moment, which is a skill I think can always get better as teachers.
Oh yeah. And we're reticent to take those teachable moments at the beginning because we have all this like a curriculum and the Common Core standards to follow or whatever it happens to be. And we don't realize that sometimes the best learning actually checks those boxes without that, planned lesson plan that we have on paper with all the resources. Sometimes it just innately comes.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about some EduMagic. How can my listeners learn from you some strategies when it comes to education and engaging in their content during their college career?
Well, the one thing that I wish, if I were to go back, like to the old share, if I could turn back time, and if I could go back and do my English degree again, I read the novels and I sort of, I got them, but I didn't go as deeply. And I really feel now if I'd approached all of my learning, because I knew that I was going into teaching, I knew I'm eventually going to teach this stuff or something similar. If I approached it as though I'm not just reading this text or this novel, I'm going to have to teach it. I think we learn so much more. Like when we think about Bloom's taxonomy and what we need to know to teach and where we are versus just consuming, that's my biggest suggestion to people when they're learning new things. In our case, the faculty or teachers college or in their education learning and beyond, learn it as though you're going to have to teach it. Because then even the most boring content comes alive in some way because you're like, okay, how am I going to make this engaging? If you can think how it would be engaging for you, then you can shift, no matter if you even have like the dry Charlie Brown wah, 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 wah at the front, you can make it engaging for yourself. And that's, I think, the depth of learning is going to be there at a level that it wouldn't be otherwise.
Learn something as if you're going to be teaching it. That is excellent. And then that helps you remember also if you're studying content for a course that you're in, it helps you learn it. And I always say, if you can teach it, you are really well off for a test or an exam. If you can teach the content to somebody else and make it engaging and fun. Yes, that's a nice teacher trick. And what about getting out of the classroom? What are some strategies you have to help pre-series teachers feel comfortable getting outside of those four walls of the college class?
So I think we need to try new things constantly as learners and push our comfort zones. So for example, I live and breathe in the world of Google. We're a Google EDU domain. I'm a digital literacy consultant. I deal with those sort of tech tools all of the time. But we need to push ourselves beyond that so we don't become stale or bored, right? For me, I think that, I think back to, I was invited to a conference to do an Ignite talk. And I don't know if you've ever done or know Ignite talks. They're 5-minute talks. You get 20 slides. They auto advance every 15 seconds. So you need to know your content because you do not have control. It's not like a typical keynote where you're like, I'm going to talk with this. Okay, I'm done. And my Daniel story was actually one of the 2 stories I shared in that. And it was the most difficult thing I'd ever done. And I'm fine with public speaking. I was that kid that was like winning speech, contests in 5th grade. And I've never been one to shy away from standing in front of a large group. But the idea that I had to have it memorized, because I'm usually I do a lot of improv when I'm speaking publicly. So the fact that I had to know it really pushed my boundaries into what I could do and helped me realize the pressures that students see when they have to present, when they're nervous. So I don't ever, not that I don't understand, like I get it, but I don't really get it when kids, but I'm so nervous to present in front of the class and they're freaking out. That helped me see, okay, it was like me when I had to memorize, right? So putting yourself into situations that push your own limits constantly will really help us build empathy with our students. This summer, I've been accepted into the Pi Academy by the Raspberry Pi Academy. And is learning all about coding and it's Python and says, I have like a tiny little bit of knowledge about it. I have a lot of interest in it. My math background will certainly help, but it's not something I'm going to go in and be really great at. And I don't normally do things or don't normally like to do things unless I know I'm going to be great at it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to apply. And if I get in, I might be the worst one in the whole place, but at least I'm going to try and see where I can go with it and see if it's for me. So I think pushing those boundaries of your learning and of your comfort zone will help you grow as an individual and learn empathy for others.
Absolutely. Thank you. So just to recap some strategies within EduMagic, go and learn things as if you're going to be teaching them and try new things. Get outside your comfort zone. I love that. All right. What is the best teaching advice that you ever received?
When I did my master's, I had my faculty advisor. Her name was Dr. Mary Coy. And she used to say, just go out and take the risks. Because at the end of the day, nobody dies. And it sounded so morbid until you realize that her husband was a commercial airline pilot. And she says, if Wayne, her husband, takes risks in his job, people are dying. If we take risks, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to teach the Cartesian plane with X's and Y's mixed up? Yeah, exactly. If we take risks like that, then we are going to push our students and push ourselves beyond the status quo. And I think that's really important. And I think about Mary a lot when I'm thinking, oh, should I do this risk or should I stay in the comfort zone where I'm happy? And I've always done this lesson that way and it works. Or thinking about, oh, this could be really cool, but I don't know if it's going to crash and burn. And pardon the sort of metaphor there with the plane. And I think about that and I'm like, well, nobody died. And when I make mistakes in the classroom or when I try something, I'm like, yeah, that didn't go very well. And be it even now and with like teacher PD and we try something. And I tell people, I'm going to try this. Not sure it's going to work, but I think it's really important to model the risk taking. And I think that's really important in what we do. We can't just stay the same. Like when I hear of teachers who are teaching the same lessons for dozens of years and it's the same photocopy, I'm like, oh my gosh, don't you get bored? Isn't there something else you want to do? So I think that whole notion of nobody's going to die and giving yourself the permission to realize that if it doesn't work, it's okay, is really empowering.
Instilling that mindset of taking risks and being okay with taking risks. I don't know if that made sense, but I think it's so important for student teachers to be willing to take a risk and try something new because they're in that safe environment. They have another teacher there that has their back and that will help encourage them and challenge them. And hopefully they will try something new and see what happens and being okay with that.
And I think too, there's an element of teachers who take on a student teacher need to realize that risk taking needs to happen. I think back to when I first started taking student teachers and I'd be like, okay, here are the lessons, just teach these and not let them necessarily go on their own. Or when they planned something that is like, that may not totally work. Say, no, you fix this, fix that. Like there's something about allowing yourself, like what happened to me, to have that moment of, oh, that really didn't work and do damage control in an authentic way. So I think there's a lot of student teachers that don't really want to push back on their mentor teacher or on their associate teacher to say, well, I really just want to try it my way. Like they stay in that comfort zone and I'd like to see a shift, although I don't totally know if I have a solution how that's going to happen because teachers really like control of their environment.
Yeah, but if we were able to help them to maybe do some productive struggle, learn from their mistakes, see what happens, reflect on it, similar to your Cartesian plane example, I think that can really help students out in ways instead of going through and saying, okay, fix this, add this, take this out, having them learn from it. Thank you so much for your time today, Jen. How can people find you online?
I am at Virtual GIF with 2 Fs everywhere. Virtualgif.com is my website, at Virtual GIF on Twitter and Instagram. So my friend and colleague, Kim Polishuk, and I decided just over a year ago to start a podcast just about ahas that we have with technology. And it's called Shukes and GIF, the podcast. So SHUKES and GIFF. The podcast, it can be found on any sort of podcatching device. So, we're in iTunes, we're in Spotify, we're in Google Play, we're everywhere. We're just coming to a close of our 2nd season, but we just share little ahas with technology. We share a tool and we're like, hey, did you see this? And then we talk to each other. We don't normally show our shares ahead of time. And it's just our banter back and forth where we say, hey, did you see this? And like, oh, we could use it here and it could be used in this way. And in the moment, we create ways that we see it could be valuable in terms of education, either in a classroom with students or to help empower educators.
So if you're looking to up your EdTech game, I definitely recommend listening to Shooks and Giff.
There you have it, friends. A great episode all about flexible teaching, engaging in those teachable moments, diving deep into that curriculum, and getting out of your comfort zone. Have a great day. You have the EduMagic within you.
Hey friends, finding a teaching job is tough, and finding the right teaching job for you can be even harder. But don't worry, AAEE has you covered. Attend the Education Career Fair on Thursday, October 24th, 2019 from 1 to 5 p.m. at the Norfolk Waterside Marriott in Norfolk, Virginia to find your perfect match. Districts from the local area and across the country are ready with jobs to offer. Whether you're looking for your first teaching job or you just want to see what options are out there, you'll be sure to make great connections that you won't regret. And you may walk away with a copy of the trusty Job Search Handbook for Educators. Candidate registration is always free, so go online, aaee.org/conference now.
There you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.